do I enjoy most about working in a rural community? Living in a rural community, I love, well, I also have to name I'm a bit, not biased, but my personality is that, like, I've grown up around here. I've always had a big personality. I've always been pretty confident in my opinions and the things that I know. And so one thing I love about living here is that I know tons of people. I love it. Like I said, the reason my sister left is the reason I love it here. Yeah. I love that, say this, I wanted to, on my bucket list, I wanted to host a backyard concert. And I made a social media post and 20 people showed up to my backyard. Wow. And from all areas of life, some that I barely know, wow. But all from around, probably Woodstock, no, maybe some on the outskirts. And I love that. Yeah. I love that it's a community that I can just be like, hey, I want to check backyard concert off my bucket list. Who wants to come? Yeah. And we can actually just gather people. And it was so cool because, and this is what I think, like, this is small scale in my backyard, but this is why I think I love living here so much, is because they were from all different walks of life. Some knew me very well from like preschool, some barely knew me at all. And everybody sat and laughed together and listened to live music and sang and cheered. And like some people didn't even know each other. But it was like for a moment, it was just like we were all friends in a backyard at a backyard concert. And I love that about Oxford County. I feel like that's like the small scale of what I feel about it on a big. And in terms of working here, I think the same thing. Sometimes people will say to me, I'm surprised you haven't ended up in Toronto. I get that a lot. Yeah. And I actually couldn't imagine being in Toronto, being here and being able to connect with people. Like every time I went to school, my placements, I did them back in Oxford County. So I've been networking here since in my 20s. And I mean, maybe even before that, before I even got into social work, I didn't realize the networking that I was doing, but I just have so many connections. And even now, not working in community and as an entrepreneur in a private practice, I still talk to my community colleagues. And I always, when I speak about them, I always talk to them about them as like my brothers and sisters in community. And I really do feel like that. And so I love that, the networking, and even like not working in community. I went down to the market the other day and seeing some of my like agency's sisters, and they were like, Jenilee! And just so excited, and we got to catch up, and they told me about some of their new initiatives, and they were asking about mine. And so I guess that's a little bit of like living here and working. Now that I'm not even working with them, I still head down to market and see them all, and we can chat and brainstorm a little bit still. And I love the connection that I feel in rural. I love that I can walk around and smile and say hello, and people will smile back.
Yeah. Jenilee, you could tell me, what do you think are some of the prominent challenges for people in rural communities, especially Oxford County?
Oh, one of the big things that comes to mind to me is that Oxford County is so vast. And so to get from one side of it to the other, I think is probably close to an hour. Because like it takes a half an hour for us to get to Tillsonburg from Woodstock. And one of the hugest things is accessibility of resources. Woodstock, where we are, is a hub of resources. We're the largest city in Oxford County. And so making sure all of our extra rural communities, villages, towns around us have access to mental health resources, our free walk-in counseling resources, and even internet.
Right.
Like there's places in Oxford County that don't have high-speed internet still. Wow. And so, I have colleagues in Tillsonburg that, in certain areas on the edges of Tillsonburg can't do video appointments with people because the internet is unstable. Right. And so we think about, especially during the pandemic, making sure that people could access those was very, very tricky. We had to be really innovative. And so I think that, to me, the number one thing is accessibility in a rural community. Okay. Yeah.
And when you say accessibility, do you mean physically being accessible? Do you mean people don't know about it? People don't know how to use it? What kind of...
Nice. I would say all of the above.
Okay.
Absolutely, because I was thinking like the vastness of the county and, you know, the hubs in Woodstock and how do we get everything else to the people for sure. But also how do you let everybody know what's available to them? Absolutely, that's a tough one.
Okay.
I mean, I always say to people, well, no one actually knows what they need until they need it, right? So that's the other thing. We can try and blast and blast and blast and blast and try and hit all the corners of the county. Yeah. But unless you really need it, are you picking up the pamphlet? Are you reading the poster? You know, are you absorbing it in until you actually need it? Which is, I mean, I guess that's maybe not rural specific, but it is hard to get all the corners of the county to know what is available to them.
What do you think is the most used resource in terms of mental health in this rural community?
Ooh. I'd probably say, and probably because it's our biggest and been around the longest, is our free walk-in counseling that we have. And it's super innovative. I don't actually know if there's any other communities doing it quite like us. What it is at one point it was 5 days a week. Somewhere in the county you could go for free counseling. You could walk in. And during the pandemic that changed to booking appointments by phone or video, depending on what was accessible for people. But it's great because there's locations in Woodstock, but there's also locations in our smaller areas. So Tillsonburg, Ingersoll, there was one in Norwich, Tavistock.
Wow.
Yeah, and so essentially, you could go 5 days a week to a different spot if you wanted, if you needed to.
So it's just endless. Like you could go,
and it's just endless. It's their single session. You walk in, they're free. And you just go in, and if you need to go in at any other time, you go back in at any other time. And I think that's been around several years now, and so I think it's used a lot because, well, it's accessible. It's in various ways around the county. After the pandemic, it's even more accessible because I think what we did was we brought in-person back, but we also stayed video and phone, which we weren't necessarily doing before the pandemic. And so I would say that's probably, and it's a great partnership between Canadian Mental Health Association, the hospital, Ingersoll Nurse Practitioner-led clinic, Community Health Center, and Welkin Child and Youth Mental Wellness.
Oh, wow.
So there's 5 agencies that work together to ensure that 5 days a week there's free counseling for people in Oxford County.
Wow.
So cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah. What makes us resilient? Our people. Totally, our people, our community. We are, I was thinking about this, if you Googled us, there's some pretty traumatic stories coming out of Oxford County. And and I just think, and I'm always talking about how resilient our community is, because we really are. We're a traumatized community. And when something happens, whether it's in Tillsonburg or Hickson or Princeton, like we're all affected at some level. And it's the people. We keep on trucking. And I mean, the agencies show up for people. It's cool, they're innovative. So our agencies go to people now, instead of making the people always come to the agencies. And so there's agency support, but there's also the resilience of our community taking care of each other. I just see like lots of what I guess they would formally call like peer-to-peer support, people helping people. But I think that happens so informally in our community. That those are like, it's our people that keep us resilient, taking care of each other and showing up for each other when stuff happens in our community and standing together, because if, like I said, if you Googled us, there's some pretty traumatic stories coming out of here. But I like to say to people, we're more than what you hear on BBC or CBC or whatever. Come see for yourself. We are more than that. We are quite a very resilient community. Yeah, jeez.
Again, this is kind of specific, but I wondered if I could dig a bit more when you say we're a resilient community.
Yeah.
In what way? Like, you do talk about the peers helping peers. Is there anything more that you could say to that?
Well, resilience.
Like, for example, if you think of urban communities, perhaps one thing that might make them a bit less resilient is there's not that necessary generational tie because people don't necessarily know everyone. So in a rural community, there might be perhaps more resilience because there's that familial tie, but also you know your neighbors. Like it's like
it's funny. I was going to say when I was talking about resiliency before, I was going to say we're like the community that like shows up with like lasagna on your doorstep. Totally right, because it is a place where you do have the opportunity to know your neighbors and or know everybody, right? And of course, there's pros and cons to that. Right? You know, you kind of hear stories like a game of telephone sometimes. But for sure, I think, and I guess that's when I think about the people. I think because we know each other. You know, that's one thing. I guess like I think about me and say my personal resilience here in town. It's funny because if I'm having a rough day and I need to pick me up, I'm gonna go to the grocery store because I'm bound to run into people that I know, and not because I need to talk to anybody, but it'd be like, hey Jenilee, hi, hey, how's it going? And a few years ago, I ran. I guess it was a number of years ago. I ran a community initiative called Smile and Say Hello. And we built on the idea about really when you walk around in Oxford County in the rural communities, like really like lots of people smile and say hello. And even if you don't know each other, we are quite a friendly community. And it was funny because the momentum of that initiative just exploded because it's true, we hold doors for people. We're like, right? We're like that, and it's funny, I laugh because it's the reason my sister left the rural community. She's like, I don't like that part. Like, I don't like that wherever I go, I know someone or someone knows me or someone's like, are you Ramona's daughter? You know, and I love that. That like feeds my soul. That's the sense of belonging I think that we have in this community, and I think that's proven when people are drawn to come here. You know, I was reading a post from someone who had moved to Woodstock just recently, talking about how friendly people were. And I really do think you're right, Carly. Like, we know our neighbors, and you know, like, I don't have familial ties here. I mean, my mom, so I have that, but my family didn't grow up here. My family doesn't live here, but I definitely, people always, this is so cheesy, people are like, yeah, okay, Jenilee, that's a little bit hippy dippy. I say like the community is my family. I do. I say they are like, these are my people. This is why I keep coming back and why I won't leave. I feel at home in Oxford County.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.